Welcome to Reddit family. Ever catch yourself humming an old tune and wondering where the years went? This story is from Reddit about a 48-year-old guy who dug out his old vinyl records and found more than just music. He found a piece of himself he'd almost forgotten. Stick with me, because this one's got layers, like those dusty grooves he pulled out of a box. Let's call him Steve. He's 48, living in a small house just outside the town, the kind with a sagging porch and a mailbox that's seen better days. Steve's a regular guy, works at an auto parts store, spends his days selling spark plugs and oil filters to folks who think they can still fix their own cars. He's got a wife, Linda, who's always on him about cleaning out the garage, and a daughter, Sarah, who's 22 and off at college, chasing a degree he doesn't quite understand. Life's steady for Steve, but lately it's felt a little flat, like a record that's lost its spin. He wakes up, goes to work, comes home, watches TV, goes to bed. Same routine, day after day. And he can't shake the feeling that something's missing. He wasn't always this way. Back in the day, we're talking late 70s, early 80s. Steve was the guy with the loudest stereo on the block. He'd saved up from his high school job flipping burgers to buy a turntable. One of those big, clunky ones with wood trim and a needle you had to set just right. He'd spend hours at the record store flipping through bins, coming home with albums by Springsteen, Fleetwood Mac, maybe some Zeppelin if he was feeling wild. His room was a mess of vinyl sleeves and crumpled concert flyers, and his buddies would pile in on Friday nights, cracking cokes and arguing over which side of rumors was better. He remembers this one night. His best friend Mike brought over a bootleg copy of a Stones concert, and they stayed up until 2 in the morning, listening to Mick Jagger belt out "Gimme Shelter," while they planned a road trip they never took. Another time, Steve scraped together every penny he had to see The Who live in '79. He was 16, standing in a sweaty crowd, screaming along to Baba O'Reilly as the lights flashed and the drums thundered, feeling like he could take on the world. Music was everything back then. It wasn't just sound, it was who he was. But life moves on. College didn't stick, too expensive, and Steve wasn't big on books anyway. He got a job, met Linda, settled down. The turntable got shoved into a closet when Sarah was born, traded for diaper bags and a crib. The records, packed up in cardboard boxes, taped shut, hauled to the garage when they moved into the house 15 years ago. Every now and then, Linda would nag him about it. "Those boxes are just taking up space, Steve." But he'd wave her off. "I'll get to it," he'd say, knowing full well he wouldn't. They sat there, collecting dust, a relic of a guy he used to be, while Steve got caught up in the grind of work, bills, and all the little things that make you forget who you were. Then one Saturday, something clicks. It's a rainy day. The kind where the sky's all gray and the air smells like wet grass. Steve's off work, Linda's out shopping, and he's got nothing to do but flip channels on the TV. He lands on some music documentary. Old footage of Woodstock, guys with long hair and guitars, and it hits him like a freight train. He remembers those nights in his room, the crackle of the needle hitting vinyl, the way Born to Run would blast through the speakers and make his heart race. He's on his feet before he even knows it, heading to the garage, pulling on an old flannel shirt because it's chilly out there. The garage is a mess. Tools scattered on a workbench, a lawnmower that hasn't worked in years, and stacks of boxes labeled with Sharpie in handwriting he barely recognizes as his own. He finds the one he's looking for, buried under a pile of Christmas decorations. Steve's records, scrolled on the side. The tape's brittle comes off in sticky strips, and when he opens it, the smell hits him. That musty, papery scent of old cardboard, mixed with something he can't quite place. He pulls out the first record he sees. The Eagles, Hotel California. The sleeves are faded, corners bent, but the vinyl inside looks okay. Just a few scratches. He runs his fingers over the grooves, feeling the tiny ridges. And it's like he's touching a piece of his past. He holds the box inside, sets it on the living room floor, and goes looking for the turntable. It's in the hall closet, behind a vacuum cleaner and a stack of board games they haven't touched since Sarah was a kid. The turntable's heavier than he remembers. The cord tangled. But he gets it set up on the coffee table, plugs it in, and prays it still works. He wipes the dust off with his sleeve, sets the needle, and drops the record on. There's a moment of silence. Then that familiar crackle, static at first. Then the opening guitar riff of Hotel California fills the room. Steve closes his eyes, and just like that, he's 17 again, sitting on his bedroom floor, dreaming about a life bigger than the one he's got. He spends the whole afternoon like that, pulling out record after records, playing stuff he hasn't heard in decades. There's Springsteen's Darkness on the Edge of Town. He remembers buying that one the day he got his first car, a beat-up Chevy that barely ran, but felt like freedom. He'd drive around town with the windows down, that album cranked up, singing Badlands at the top of his lungs like he was some kind of rock star. Then there's Fleetwood Mac's Tusk, which he played on repeat the summer he met Linda at a county fair, her laughing as he tried to win her a stuffed bear and failed miserably. He pulls out a copy of Pink Floyd's The Wall next, and suddenly he's back in his senior year, sitting in his buddy Dave's basement. The two of them talking about how they'd move to California one day, start a band, live the dream. They never did. Of course, Dave's a plumber now, got 3 kids, but that album still feels like a promise they made to each other. Each record's a memory, a little piece of who he used to be. And Steve's grinning like a kid, singing along to lyrics he didn't even know he still remembered. He finds an old copy of Billy Joel's The Stranger, and it takes him back to a different time, when Sarah was little, maybe 4 or 5. And he'd play Just the Way You Are on quiet evenings after she'd gone to bed. Linda would be in the kitchen, washing dishes, and he'd sneak up behind her, spin her around, dance with her right there in the middle of the linoleum floor. Sarah would wake up, sometimes toddle out in her pajamas, and they'd scoop her up, all 3 of them swaying to the music, laughing until they were out of breath. He hasn't thought about that in years, but now it's all he can see. And there's a lump in his throat he can't quite swallow, inspired by the rediscovery. Steve decides to dig deeper. The next weekend, he heads to a local flea market, the kind of place where you can find anything, from rusty tools to faded postcards. He's on a mission now. He wants to find more records, maybe some rare ones he missed back in the day. He spends hours flipping through crates, chatting with an old guy named Carl, who's selling records out of the back of a van. Carl's got stories of his own. He tells Steve about seeing Jimi Hendrix live in '69, and Steve trades him a story about that Who concert in '79. In the end, Steve walks away with a few new additions. A first pressing of Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde, a little scratched, but playable, and a copy of The Doors' Woman that Carl throws in for free. You look like you'll take care of it, Carl says with a wink, and Steve feels like he's just been handed a treasure. Back home, he plays the new records, and they're just as magical. Riders on the Storm from the Doors album fills the room with its haunting keyboard intro, and Steve can almost feel the rain Jim Morrison sings about, like he's standing on some lonely highway in the middle of nowhere. The Dylan record's a little rough, skips a bit on Visions of Johanna, but Steve doesn't care. It's the imperfections that make it real, like the scratches on his own life, the dreams that didn't quite pan out but still left their mark. Linda comes home around 5, arms full of grocery bags, and stops dead in the doorway. "What's all this?" she asks, looking at the records scattered across the floor. The turntable spinning, Steve sitting there with a beer in his hand and a smile she hasn't seen in years. He just laughs, pats the couch next to him. "Come on, sit down. You gotta hear this." She rolls her eyes, but sits anyway, kicking off her shoes, and he puts on Landslide, her favorite. They don't talk much at first, just listen. And when the song ends, she leans her head on his shoulder. Says, "I forgot how much I love this." Steve turns to her, a little sheepish. "I forgot how much I loved you listening to it with me," he says, and Linda smiles, nudges him with her elbow. "You're such a sap." She teases, but she doesn't move away. They sit there through a few more songs, and Linda starts telling him about the first time she heard a Landslide. Back when she was a teenager, driving her dad's old Buick with the windows down, feeling like the whole world was hers for the taking. Steve listens, really listens, and realizes how long it's been since they just sat like this, sharing stories, letting the music fill the spaces between them. Later that night, Steve posts on Reddit, "Found my old records today. Felt like I found myself." And that's the heart of it. It's not just about the music. It's about the guy he was, the dreams he had, the people he shared them with. Those records aren't just vinyl. They're a time machine, taking him back to a version of himself he thought he'd lost. He starts making it a ritual. Every Saturday, he pulls out a few albums, plays them loud, lets the memories wash over him. Sometimes Linda joins him. Sometimes he's alone. But either way, he's happier than he's been in a long time. He even calls Sarah at college the next week, tells her about the records, and she laughs, says, "Dad, you should play some for me when I'm home for break." Steve's already looking forward to it. Maybe he'll show her that Billy Joel album, tell her about those nights they danced in the kitchen, see if she remembers. But it's more than just nostalgia. You know, Steve starts thinking about what music's meant to him over the years. How it got him through the tough times, the lonely nights, the moments when he didn't know if he'd make it. He thinks about the first time he heard Thunder Road, how Springsteen's voice felt like a call to action, like he was telling Steve to get out there, take a chance, live a life worth singing about. He thinks about the way Stairway to Heaven played at his senior prom. Him standing awkwardly in a rented tux, too shy to ask anyone to dance but dreaming about the girl across the room. He thinks about how Sweet Home Alabama was on the radio the day he proposed to Linda. Both of them sitting in his old pickup, her saying yes with tears in her eyes. Music's been there for all of it. The highs, the lows, the in-betweens. And finding these records feels like finding a map of his own life. Every song, marking a moment he didn't realize mattered. Until now, this story's for anyone who's ever felt like life's passing them by. Maybe you've got a box of your own out there. Records, photos, old letters, whatever it is that takes you back. Go find it. Play that song. Flip through that album. Read that letter. You'd be surprised what you might find. Not just the past, but a little piece of you that's still there. Waiting. Hits home. Does it? I bet some of you have vinyl stories of your own. Drop them in the comments. I read every one. Subscribe for more tales like this. I'm here every day with stories from Reddit and beyond. So stick around. See you next time.